So speaking of party unity, over the past few years, we have seen divisions open up in the state's Democratic Party between those on the far left and those closer to the middle. And in some cases, that's moved the entire party further left. Think of issues like legal cannabis and criminal justice. But that hasn't always worked to their advantage. Republicans in New York won some key races last year, campaigning on proposals from the far left, even if their opponents were more moderate. But Democrats say this year won't be the same. For more on that, I turn this week to the chair of the state Democratic Party, Jay Jacobs. Jay, thank you so much for coming back. I appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Of course, anytime. So let's talk about this year's elections. I think it's fair to say that last year Democrats didn't get the results they were hoping for in some key elections, especially down on Long Island where you are right now. I'm wondering, as you look into this year as the party's chair, what's your strategy this year to not have that same trend in this year's elections? What do you want to do differently to get more Democrats in that winner's circle over those Republicans?
Well, you have to remember a large part of our problem in the last election and what happens in many elections, particularly the odd year elections, which are low turnout elections to begin with, is you're a bit at the mercy of the political environment at the time. So we came into that election with 71% of the American public saying that the country was going in the wrong direction. Our president's poll numbers were down, inflation was up, gas prices and the like. And of course, COVID was on the rebound and people were really unhappy. And then you had the underlying unhappiness over mandates. So I think the political environment, for starters, is going to be better, but it's still going to be a tough campaign, as they all are. And we're going to do everything we can to get our message out and combat the Republicans' message.
You know, when you look at messaging, Republicans have really driven hard over the past few years this debate over crime. We've seen a rise in crime nationally, obviously, which has happened here in New York as well. They've really pinned all this on bail reform, which is being discussed at the state capitol right now. I'm wondering from the perspective of a Democrat as the party's chair, so Democrats in the state legislature are saying that they're probably not going to amend bail reform. So how do you get voters back on your side in this debate over crime? How do you convince them that Democrats as well can really nail down on this crime issue here in New York?
Well, first thing is we have to be straight with the public. Crime is a real problem, and we take it seriously, and Mayor Adams is taking it very seriously. And there are things that we can do to beef up appropriate policing and get involved in our communities to reduce crime. But using the false narrative that crime in New York is up because of bail reform has been something the Republicans have relied on because their strategy is all about either scaring the voters or making them angry. This is a national problem. Now, does that mean there aren't things that we can do to fine-tune that bail reform law? Of course. And I think that the Democrats will be looking at that. I don't write that off. But I think for the most part, you have to understand the good that bail reform has done. And let's go back to the start of this whole thing. What's your objective? What do you really want to do? We all want safer streets. We want crime to come down. Then the answer is to be, not that Democrats are soft on crime, but we have to be smart on crime. And some of the things we did in bail reform are smart. And they're going to help make sure that people don't get into a life of crime, which gets them into that revolving door of incarceration, back out on the street and back into jail again. So we want to try to avoid that if we can, improve society, and yet at the same time be tough on violence and guns and all of the things that threaten real people across our city and state.
You know, in the party, there is a divide on this issue where some people don't want to change bail reform at all. Others are really strongly in favor of some sort of change, some sort of tweak. We don't really know what that would be yet. How do you reconcile that in these two factions of your party heading into this year's elections? If nothing happens with bail reform, I don't know if that's such an important conversation to have, but how do you reconcile those two factions that are so they're just on different sides of this issue, it seems?
Well, I think we have to have open conversations. And I've been doing that. I've been talking to legislative leaders, folks on the governor's team, and of course, law enforcement. I met with the president of the Nassau County PBA last week just to get their perspective. I want to hear from as many people as possible to get a good sense of really what are the solutions, what's the smart thing to do, where are the real problems, and where do we need to take action. But I think by listening to each other and respecting each other, we can make progress. A big part of the divide is around the issue of race, frankly, because we take this term dangerousness and wanting to give judges the discretion to require bail, even if the crime doesn't require it, just because the alleged defendant meets a certain dangerousness standard. Well, the problem is for many people, that term dangerousness might mean more blacks and not whites, and it becomes a racial question, and we don't want to see that, and that's certainly not what anybody means. So I think that by carefully looking at these issues and defining clearly what kind of discretion we're looking to allow judges to take in extraordinary circumstances where otherwise they might not need bail, I think we can have a conversation around that, and we can do so respectfully.
On a broader sense, there's also a split in your party between this far left side of the Democratic Party. Some of them are aligned with the Democratic Socialists of America. And then you have the other side of the party, which is a little bit more in the middle, more of your moderate Democrat, your establishment Democrat, for lack of a better term. How do you bring those two sides together in this year's elections? We've seen the Working Families Party, which is considered far left, endorse Jumaane Williams in the primary for governor. Governor Hochul won't be getting that. I'm assuming she's going to have the Democratic nomination. But how do you put those two sides of the party together going into the general so you can unite against the other party, the other major party, I should say?
Well, the first thing I would say to you is I know that you have a lot of Republicans out there and even some independents who are allowing the Republicans to paint all Democrats as socialists. They paint Biden as a socialist. You're not going to find somebody more moderate than Joe Biden, but okay. So, use your broad paintbrush and do what you want. We have to explain to the public who we are. But as for getting along with those on our far left, I think it comes down to looking at what we all want to achieve. Not about power, not about personal benefit, but what are you looking to achieve? And I think that the folks on the far left, and I disagree with much of their platform as to what or how they want to do it, but their heart is in the right place. I respect their passion. I respect their approach. And I think they help push the moderates in the Democratic Party more to more action than we might otherwise do. And I think that's a good thing. So I think the messaging is, look, your ideas are worthy of discussion. You're a part of our bigger tent. But, if this is a country that still believes in democracy, then the majority rules. And in the Democratic Party, the overwhelming majority of Democrats still are moderates. So yes, let's have those conversations, but we're not going to let one end of the party that's really much smaller dictate to the rest. And I'm not going to allow Republicans to paint this party as a party of socialists or a party of the far left when we are the party of progress that has done so much good in face of the Republican Party, which frankly, think about it, does nothing. You have proposed nothing. And I think it's time you get out there and tell the people what you want to do with all this power you are fighting so hard to accumulate.
All right, well, that's something that we will be watching over the next couple of months, head to the primary and then on to the general. State Democratic Chair Jay Jacobs, thank you so much as always.
Thanks for having me.